talk that I did up at the FMCEE. And, when I rewatch it later, let us know we're in the green room, Don, because, you're always in a few seconds before Don actually lets you know. Yeah, I know. It's kind of funny.
I know you have to watch what you say.
No, some people gotta wait. People always got to wade through a little bit of me and this and that, and tell them bad Cleveland Browns jokes, stuff like that. We are in the green room.
Welcome to another episode of the Green Room. And before we get started, because my heart's always with Hawaii, so for the Maui,
wow,
just may the gods in the vault in the wind.
It just goes to show you that no matter where you are, and you can be in the middle of paradise that way, and natural disasters,
For Lahaina, the town of Lahaina, if you've ever been to Maui, I mean, it's the center.
I saw some photos this morning on Facebook that were pretty striking.
So it's terrifying there. So
I feel like we're back in the green room. We have a great guest that I'll introduce in a moment. But listen, you were off last week, and I was off on my vacation and everything. Kids are back at school.
Yeah, I know. It took me 15 minutes extra to get through all the stops and goes along the way.
Well, there were parents kissing their kid at the bus stop today too.
Yeah,
but kids are back at school, and I really think it is a time to reset, really, about what the green room really is all about. Mm-hmm. Which, of course, we always talk a little politics, and we will. But we really have a great guest today when we talk medical cannabis. And listen, Sanjay Gupta and CNN had a fantastic special Sunday, literally focusing on seniors and medical cannabis. And it's, a continuation of his weed series, and he's done fantastic work. And listen, I've tweeted Dr. Sanjay a couple times in the past. If you're watching, thank you. And we have one of his guests, Dr. Melanie Bone, who, listen,
great job on the special.
Often in the green room, I get to introduce people, but not always people as significant to my practice of medical cannabis as Dr. Melanie Bone, who's been a mentor to me, a practitioner down here in Florida, OBGYN originally, but now really doing groundbreaking, awesome work with seniors. And we'll get back to it in a second, but I know she's OBGYN originally, and we got to go a little politically. I got to salute Ohio for standing up for citizens' rights. And ultimately it's an abortion battle. So Dr. Bone, OBGYN doc, weigh in, because I know you follow this acutely. And, in Florida, there's also a ballot initiative, right? Get to that first, because I know if we don't, we won't get there.
Yeah, so in the state of Florida, we're at the period of signature collecting, just like we did for the ballot initiative to legalize adult use of cannabis. And that's, stuck in the Supreme Court with Ashley Moody. But we are collecting signatures. We are way ahead of pace, and you can get it online. Floridians for Protecting Freedom, I think it's called. But if you just Google abortion ballot initiative, and make sure you read the fine print to know that you're signing on to the right side, meaning the correct side as opposed to the right side. If we collect enough signatures, we may very well have a ballot initiative that can make it to the voter polls in next year, which would codify and permanently legalize abortion up until viability in the state of Florida. And beyond for certain specific considerations. Now, really amazing people have signed on. One of the promoters of this is Justice Barbara Pariente, who was our Supreme Court justice. She was head of the Supreme Court in the state of Florida, one of the highest positions in the state of Florida. And Mona Reese, who owned and operated Presidential Women's Clinic in West Palm Beach, probably the foremost abortion clinic in the state of Florida. I know Planned Parenthood is behind it. So
it's grassroots, and I think that's what every vote shows, quite frankly. And the Republicans, to me, and so but the point is, we need 60% here in Florida, not 50%, because that was done, and I asked you this before we went on, Ruta, that was done in the legislature, not by a vote of the people. No, so why didn't we get a chance in Florida to vote on that? Is it just a different?
They wanted to
I got it.
They didn't want
so we're getting 60%, but to me, that's going to drive a lot of Democratic boots on the ground
drive
for votes.
Republican women.
No doubt.
This is a women's issue.
Well, it is. It's a nonpartisan.
It is. The
health
women
issue.
are coming out very strongly against.
And I would also say it's a men's issue because,
Absolutely, issue.
these women would not be in this position if there weren't men around. So we know it could be your daughter, your daughter-in-law, your son's girlfriend, partner. You just have no idea. So I think anyone who respects people's right to do with their body that they feel they need to do and to obtain medical care. And by the way, abortion is medical care. They should be able to do so. Not to get on a soapbox, but I would point out that I think everybody who's opposed to abortion should probably go visit a clinic for a day, because it is not like most people think it is. People don't just walk in and say, hey, I think I'll have an abortion today. They go in, they actually get counseled for a long time. And in the state of Florida, they have to go home for 24 hours before they can even come back and get the pill to do an abortion at 6 weeks. So it's not, it's women who, for many reasons, have ended up at that clinic. They've lost their job. They have 3 mouths to feed. It's just terrible.
It's compassionate care for women at a time when, and families, okay, I don't know why I always fall into it that way. It's compassionate care for families when families most need it. And you're right, Mel. I think there is a misconception to the extent of what goes on, behind closed doors, in that type of environment where people are caring for others. And that's the thing that gets me about it, just the imposition of other people's values, be they religious or otherwise, upon, people that are, quite frankly, probably better educated than they and fully able to make their own decisions in 2023.
Well, even going outside of Planned Parenthood, I mean, you have to go armored and around the building because all the protesters are there daily bombarding all these people that are trying to get answers and counseling, and it's not an easy decision for anyone.
So is there been a diminished number, of course, of providers of services over fear or any of that within the OBGYN community, Mel?
Well, absolutely. So right now we're at a 15-week ban, and that's being litigated at the Supreme Court level. Ultimately, if that goes through without any further litigation, 30 days later, the 6-week ban goes into effect. So at this moment, are there people who have said, I see the writing on the wall, they should have that answer out of the Supreme Court pretty soon, and they're all preparing. But even if it gets to the point of a 6-week, I hope that this ballot initiative will go through and people would be able to find abortion care in this state within another year. But that's too long of a time to ask practitioners to wait to see. So they'll go back and do other things elsewhere.
Is there going to have to be a Supreme Court review of language as well on this initiative? And, there's roadblocks.
Always roadblocks. But remember, Justice Periente, who was the head of the Supreme Court,
she wrote it,
helped to construct the verbiage. So it would be pretty outrageous for them to find something wrong when she helped write it.
Yep. So let's get to where we, I know everybody wants, it's funny. I put on my Facebook post, do you know a senior? Are you a senior? I'm seniors, and listen, senior healthcare and medical cannabis is just a great topic. And, I salute once again, CNN and Dr. Sanjay for continuing it. But, Mel, I know you've been doing great work over on the East Coast of Florida with Morris, Life. And actually, and as I said, she's been a mentor to me for a lot of reasons, because she's been churning the waters of Florida for longer than I, but also has been very focused on a population that we can't really get to, Ruta, which is that in-house population of nursing home patients. And she's done a fantastic job of really getting involved with some spaces that are so critical towards really trying to provide us some research and guidance So, and here's the last thing I want to say about the Sanjay special. You did a great job, but who also did a great job were the patients. Okay. And I don't know
My
if
guys.
90-year-old guys, but Ruta and I talk about it all the time, and we need to do it. It's the patient stories, quite
patient
frankly,
stories always
that
have
always
win
move the
over.
needle
Always.
more than anything,
Yeah,
more
that's
than you, Dr. Bone, me, Dr. Barry,
Yeah,
our
it's
experiences. It's when the patients
Patients.
are joyful and gleeful and telling their stories
Oh,
and
man.
about their benefits. So I don't know if they were your patients or not or whatever, but that was awesome. So
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I picked those two patients specifically because I thought they were a really neat representation of very advanced age and the ability to successfully utilize cannabis. Yeah, so that made me proud. And I think what I've learned is there's seniors and then there are other seniors, and it's hard to mix them all into one lump sum of seniors.
we get all PO'd. Now that I'm
you're
67. Yeah, no, it's true. And listen, I like to call myself the zone of maintenance right now. I just want to keep what I got. No, I want to keep what I got.
Oh, okay.
If I'm 67 now, if I can get to 87, still be driving my own car, rooting for the same bad sports teams. I'd like to have both hips if I can. But seriously, there's a certain point where and 20-year blocks are pretty good. And I know, Mel, you worked with some fantastic seniors, but you also work with some seniors that are obviously in the dementia, of course, and impairment. So tell us about your experience and really the benefits that you found with really monitoring,
Sure.
having nurses.
No, it's really interesting what I've noticed. When I first got to Morse, which was in 2019, initially, literally the first 6 months was trying to get staff to even think of me as other than anything than someone from outer space, because this was something that just never came across their radar. It wasn't really even prejudicial. It just seemed so odd to them. And ultimately, through a lot of education campaigns and some things, we started to get a little traction with people making appointments, and boom, COVID hit. So when COVID hit, everything got shut down because, first of all, we couldn't get people to dispensaries and people couldn't deliver to Morse. It was a locked-in community. And that happened for quite a long time, and it really did set us back a bit. So the post-COVID era has had more people who have gotten older now, and the average age at Morse is 91.
Wow.
Which tells you a lot, because there are 800 people on the campus.
Wow.
Okay. So,
91.
But imagine that's the average. So you're looking.
No, I know.
The average.
I know. And what's hard, it's hard for me because I think different clusters within the community have different age ranges. So we have independent living that are people who are able to really go out under their own power and drive, and that's Ken and Marvin, and they go to the dispensary and they buy their own products and they self-administer, and they're actually very good. And for them, it's just a matter of education, follow-up, and support, which I think, as Ken pointed out, when he first started, he inadvertently took too much and got high and dizzy, and then came to me and said, oh no, I got to do this different. This isn't right. And it was exactly how cannabis is supposed to be. I wish he had gone a little slower on the way up, but I often see people jump higher because they're so desperate for relief.
Yes.
It's like if somebody says to me, take a Tylenol for your headache. Well, why couldn't I just take two? My headache is really bad. So it's human nature, I think, to want to get immediate relief. Now, if you go to a slightly less functional group that don't really go into a dispensary, well, we can get them certain products because we can help them order it can be delivered, even if they're wheelchair bound, they can wheel down to the porte cochere where the drivers come, and then they can sign for their product, and then we can guide them for use. Their wives or spouses or partners or caregivers can be a caregiver and do that for them. That's another approach. And so that helps a lot with people who need more support.
Sure,
Now,
but
after that, we're into, what's that?
things like a universal caregiver status, right? For a facility,
That would
for
be
example,
great.
right? So I
Yeah.
mean, some things, there are solutions, that can be worked in that I know, listen, you deal with that type of stuff every day.
Absolutely. So when I first started working, Morse did something really amazing. They got the state of Florida to approve multiple caregivers for one person, but in the fine lines that I don't think people realize, it had to be part of a CCORC study. So I think for many reasons, the other issue was it didn't work both ways. Multiple caregivers, one patient, multiple patients, one caregiver. So implementing it became impossible for a number of reasons. Not only that, but the fact that the nurses at Morse are paid in part by Medicare, Medicaid dollars. And they are worried that some of that'll happen to them if they touch THC.
And here in Florida, they've taken it the other way, because if you're not a first degree relative and you want to be a caregiver for somebody, now you got to do the background check and so they fingerprinting and this and that. So an employed, CRNA, assistant in a home or something like that, that's not a relative, theoretically he has to jump through a lot of hoops. So it's tough.
And again, if you're tied to Medicare, Medicaid, again, they're afraid of everything because that's licensed.
I want to go back to Ken and his experience of taking too much and having that negative experience, because one of the most offensive things to me about providers, unfortunately, of medical cannabis services right now is that they don't respect the patients enough, quite frankly, to make sure that they deliver that cautionary advice and education.
It's very scary.
That's important. And that's why I thought that the show, in spite of, those who may not have thought that it was balanced, right? And, I thought it gave seniors a lot of hope, but I thought that it was a point. And it was made a point that if you don't do it appropriately, that we don't want weakness. We don't want dizziness. We don't want people to have that high experience where they don't want to have it. And that's all about the teaching and the education about all of the cannabinoids. And I know you've had some issues to the extent of what cannabinoids, Mel, you actually can use and what cannabinoids you can't use within your research and within the settings in which you're working. And I know you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging. So I work on the memory care unit where these people get sundowning, they get agitated in the evening, they get anxious, they have trouble calming down for bed. So very quickly, we were able to initiate CBD for these people because it did not have THC. The nurses felt comfortable doing it. The CEO was a great proponent. And I provided all product, labeled everything, how to do it with an order specifically. And me and my staff, we monitored. And after the first few months, when nothing bad happened to anybody, I would say now, years later, it's pretty standard for us to use CBD on the memory care unit. And the woman Iris on the special, who cried every day until we initiated CBD, it was an amazing story. It really was. And she still to this day has done very, very well. I haven't seen her cry, I don't think in a year or two. Now,
wow.
The problem is some of them, they start on CBD, it doesn't work quite as well as we would like. So we would love to add THC. And that was where we had the hard stop on memory care. So I did apply for an IRB study, and to avoid the Delta 9 THC issue, I thought, well, what if I use Delta 8? Because in the state of Florida, Delta 8 is kind of like THC, right? I went so far as to have the Delta 8 made at one of the FDA approved facilities, Groff North America. I went before the IRB, the Institutional Review Board at your university, which they're tasked with patient safety, right? And they looked at my protocol and they said, well, cannabis can make you fall down and get dizzy. And what are you going to do? And I said, well, patients on a locked memory care unit with dementia already have a high risk of falling down, right? So I don't think we will.
Seroquel, and that's in Remeron, and that's right. Every other drug, of course, that's used in that unit has those same cautions.
Right, but they kept coming back with, well, if you add this and then they fall down, then it was probably your product, and who's liable?
Yeah, who's liable?
Right, but that makes it hard to research to a certain extent, to prove that doesn't happen.
But the problem is, who wants that liability?
I got it.
Right, and the IRB it took almost a year just on that one aspect for 2.5 milligrams of Delta 8, which is not enough to probably get anybody impaired in any way. So we went round and around and around, and eventually we worked it all out. Because I said, this is an informed consent. The families understand the risk. And by the way, we couldn't consent the patients, right? Because they have dementia. So we were consenting legal adult representatives, which is a little bit more challenging. And they tend to be a little more conservative, although some are like, please give my loved one anything. It's okay, because while people don't like to look at it this way, people that go on to a locked memory care unit almost never leave because they're getting better. And so I say,
Steelers fan, Browns fan, and whether that would be a good thing or not, but yeah, I think once you're in the memory care unit, you're probably not getting out. Yeah.
So it's almost like a form of hospice care. It's palliative. No one there tries to cure you of your dementia. And so how could it be a bad thing? What's really funny is when patients have cancer, hospice, you would think, would be the perfect place to institute cannabis. They use lots of narcotics, but hospice often is funded by CMS. And so the very people that could benefit can't get it unless they're at home with their loved one and their loved one is responsible.
Oh.
So it's like our federal laws have made us tied up without much hope of finding a way to do the good research.
No, you offer us hope because you knocked your noggin against the IRB, and listen, the forehead scar is healed. So you ultimately got Delta 8 capabilities right within the unit. And what have you seen?
Well, I got it, and guess what? I had only 5 eligible patients, and by the time I got approval, 3 had passed away. And I said, there's no way. This study was funded by a private donor. And I said, I can't waste a private donor's money to study 2 or 3 people. Those are case reports, right? So at the end of the day, I'm waiting. As the census goes back up, I may reapply and get it reinstated. And if not, if somebody has a unit with a lot of people who might qualify, I have it all, the study protocols, everything ready to go head to head with another IRB. But I guess I was hopeful that ultimately one day we'll have an easier time doing this
Well, we will.
research.
We
Yeah.
will. Listen, you and I collaborated on a fantastic article in the National Elder Law. So I always get their name wrong, but listen, and it is, Mel, it's those type of things that, really, we've seen those small, slow, but steady steps towards positivity. And, I think it's the patient response, and I know I can see it in your face and your eyes too, is what keeps you doing what you do with passion, and the Kens, of the world, and your other patients who do light up, but it's got to be done right, and once again, that's all.
She has the protocols all set up, which is great.
It is, and
Other
but
places,
frustrating when that's.
states that that is doing the same kind of research as you? Anywhere else?
Who's that?
I'm just asking, have you faced with anyone else that's doing sort of?
Well, so there's a husband and wife team in California, Coachella, and they have a podcast on dementia, and they always work with people. And the hardest part to figure out, so if you're looking for NIDA or NIH studies, I just actually went online. There really aren't many in dementia. They've done them.
Chella's father, Chella's father, of course, is living with them now. So she has the personal, and I know them well as well, and Dave, and they have the personal experience now of assisting her father with advanced dementia. And once again, anecdotal case studies, it's what we have, Ruta and I laugh about it. We have our stack of survey data, in our office, which we know is not those double-blinded, placebo-based research studies that are so hard to do in cannabis, and that's why I salute you for your persistence, to that extent. But it's each and every patient and family.
It's true. And then somewhere along the line, somebody did a study using synthetic THC, Marinol. And they gave it to people with dementia to see if it helped. And they did not have positive outcomes. So that, of course, you have to refer to that article when you present a study, and people look at that and go, well, why are you trying to do it? And you try to explain the difference between a synthetic THC analog and marijuana or cannabis, and it becomes very difficult to say to them, but you're talking about apples and oranges here.
I think in answer to your question, Ruta, yes, there are things going on. A lot of Israeli research and usage of cannabis, and Dr. Sanjay focused on that. UCLA also has an active study going on right now. I know evaluating pain. I know Michelle Weiner and others down in Miami, have things going on. So yes, there are studies, and the consortium here in Florida, I think also, but but once again, it's that inpatient population that's so interesting. And as I talk to patients about what our goals need to be as we go forward with medical cannabis here in the state of Florida. And I know, Mel, you'll agree with me that as we go forward towards legal adult use, whatever that looks like in Florida, we need to make sure that we protect the quality of our product here in Florida with the appropriate labeling and testing, and making sure that we get those ratio products, right, that have both THC and CBD. We need to make sure the dispensaries, this is my soapbox, we need to make sure the dispensaries, continue with the patches, right, and the creams and the tinctures, and the suppositories for the politicians, as I like to say. But, my point is all the various delivery routes, it's really to make cannabis medicine. And if we don't insist on that and hold their feet to the fire, of course, keeping our taxes at zero, is an important thing too. But it's, it's about access.
It's about access, but it's also, I think, about stability of the product, because I think the only other frustration that we hear, and even some of the studies that we did here, some of the surveys, a lot of times, like some personal comments of the patients are that it's dependability of the product is a little bit worrisome, just because they get used to something that actually after trial and error of what's working for them, they finally discover something that works, and then all of a sudden the dispensary is not doing it. And as a medicine, that becomes extremely frustrating. And I think that some of the, especially with elderly patients, I can't even imagine that they must be extremely, exhausted mentally of just thinking, like, it finally worked now, what do I do?
As you can tell, I'm jumping on my
Yes, you
chair
are.
because as usual, no, as usual, we're close to 9 o'clock, but I had a question that I wanted to make sure that I asked Mel, because listen, we have people that watch us from all over the country and, maybe even the world at this point, maybe, I don't know, but no, seriously, what can families do
Yeah.
right now? And what's the best way that citizens can work with facilities if their families are in in an assisted living or a nursing home environment? What's the route right now? Is it through the doctor that is the doctor in the house, or do you work through the administration, or is there a nurse manager in general? Where's the checkpoint right now where families can really start to, make the conversation and make the impact?
Great question. So at Morse, after all these years, when you sign to become a resident, there is in the onboarding documents a paper that you sign to say, I am interested in a cannabis consultation. I'd love to see that at every facility, but that would require that you have a specialist available at every facility. So
there's a lot of
here's the thing.
unhappy ER docs out there right now, Mel, that I'm sure would like to transition. No, I'm teasing you, but I think it will be a new career in medicine. Will be that person
even
that
a hospitalist.
absolutely a hospitalist type of thing that does specialize in cannabis. Go ahead. Yep.
Correct. And then the thing is, until the federal government either makes an exception for seniors, which could be something that they might want to consider doing, where in a controlled environment like a memory care unit or assisted living facility, where the risks and fears of diversion and et cetera, can be controlled, then you give them dispensation to use cannabis under the aegis of a cannabis specialist. So I wish the doctors that run elder care facilities were specialists, but they're not. And we did a study on this about the attitudes and perceptions of doctors who work at nursing homes. It's really bad. Most of them won't even consider it. They say they don't know anything about it. It's dangerous because it'll make the patients fall or have drug-drug interactions or get dizzy. And so that is a mountain that has to be climbed to explain to them that when done correctly with microdosing in particular in this group, you can have great success without the side effects. And I have never seen a significant drug-drug. So you have to change the attitudes of these CMOs in these facilities. You got to get the CEOs of the facilities on board to push it in their state and with their local medical care. And you have to find somebody like me, who used to do it was Ken Brummelsmith, to forward the cause of seniors and cannabis.
Yeah, Ken was awesome. That's truly his former medical director in Florida. And he came out of the senior care zone. It was always a proponent, very active and fantastic voice, as you have been. And we thank you so much for it.
Thank you for all you do, really.
And listen, we'll have you back. It's funny because we need to utilize our specialists here in Florida, even more than we do. And there's always an interest in this topic. I mean, let's face it, everybody, like I said, is either a senior already or knows one. And it's just about bringing cannabis, appropriately, into the space, so as an adjunct and as an assist. So it was great to have you, and stay healthy and well.
And we would like to have you back again.
So have you had anybody reach out since the show? Any other media necessarily? Anybody wanting to follow up on the story to a certain extent?
Yep. I've had a few people call me. Certainly the phone's been ringing for more appointments, both at Morse and outside of Morse, but that wasn't my intention. We just keep pushing to forward the cause, right?
You got it.
No, thank you so much again for everything.
Stay healthy and well.
Okay, you guys, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
You got it.
See all to all our listeners. We'll see you again next week.